Welcome to the MAM Journals. Today, as you can see, I'm going to be talking about the Royal Enfield Classic 350, a new bike that's been launched. I actually did a video on the Meteor about a month ago, which I enjoyed. And what I'm going to do is actually going to pop this bike up on a ramp in the garage next door and just talk through the engine, the chassis, the suspension, the brakes. We'll then talk about finish, weight, dimensions, and then I'll come back and I'll talk to you about what my overall riding experience was and what my thoughts are between the two bikes. Hope you enjoy the video. Right, so logical place to start is with the engine. What actually is it? It's a single cylinder, 4-stroke, single overhead cam, 349cc engine. It produces 19.9 brake horsepower, let's call it 20, and 27 Newton meters of torque at 4,000 revs. That's quite a soft tune of engine. I'm actually running this one in, but I have ridden a Meteor about a month ago, which is exactly the same engine, so I do know what it performs like when it's actually run in. Strangely, when you're running these, they give you a weird sort of grid, and it tells you that where to change gear and what speed to do in each, because there's no rev counter on the bike, and it translates. The running in period, certainly for the first 300 miles, is 43 miles an hour in fifth. Most of us would struggle to sort of keep to that, but certainly I'm being very careful with the engine. I haven't laboured it, I've not thrashed it, opened it full throttle, and I've allowed it to cool down after every sort of 50 minutes or so. Well, it let the engine cool down and me took the opportunity to warm up. One of the things I suffer from is curiosity, and I couldn't quite get my head around why a 349cc bike only produces 20 brake horsepower. So I began to think, well, maybe it's something to do with the sort of old engine design in there. And maybe it's just got a big old piston in there with long skirts. And I just thought one of the reasons I put those on there is just to explain what I mean. Traditionally, pistons look a bit like that. This one, as you can see, has been in a couple of fights, terminal fights as it happens. This is actually out of an RD400, so it's a 200cc because that was a twin. And that long skirt, i.e. the length from there to there, is a very traditional approach. You know, ends up with a heavy piston, but normally, and not in this particular case, but normally gives you good reliability. And this is a different example. This is out of an enduro bike. This is out of a Honda 250, and that's very short skirted. And as a result of that, you don't traditionally get the level of reliability, and you actually replace that. I think every maybe 200-300 hours you put a new piston in. That was just one out of one of my old race bikes, and I thought, I wonder whether they've just got one of those old ones in there. But I then got on the internet and found a service manual. I found it on a Russian website, so if the channel vanishes, or indeed I vanish overnight, it's the Russians who've got me. And actually, looking through the service manual and shows a piston, you can see the picture of the piston on the screen. It's actually quite a modern looking piston, modern construct. So what it's actually doing in there is it is modern technology. What's slowing it down is the state of tune they put through the ECU, which is at the back there, and the way they put the catalytic converter on it, which is behind that cover plate there. It's just reduced the power and they built it to a soft tune. So it's definitely not a taxed engine. It should bode well. I actually met somebody who knew me and knew that I'd actually been involved in the folly of building a big bore Interceptor, and said, "Oh, have you bought that? Are you going to tune it?" And my straight answer was, "Well, no, I wouldn't tune it." And frankly, you might do something about the exhaust here. You might. It doesn't make the best. It's quite a muted noise for us. You know, from what I remember, I've raced singles off road, so I'm used to quite a sort of thumpy single cylinder, and this feels very muted. You might change that end can, but most of the constraint is obviously going to be in terms of the ECU and the cat behind there. So, you know, would I tune it? honestly, no, it's not the sort of bike you would tune. I don't think it's really the approach that you take. If I wanted a slightly more powerful Royal Enfield, I'd spend the same sort of money that this is, just over £4,000, and buy a used Interceptor if I was looking for more performance. It is what it is, and I think it's to be respected and liked for what it is. So that sort of covers the engine. Let's have a look at the chassis and suspension. Right, chassis, suspension and brakes. Royal Enfield have got a pretty good design centre, and as I've commented in other videos, they actually bought Harris Performance, who know one or two things about chassis and suspension. It's the geometry's pretty sound. You know, the bike handles well. I can't quite get to grips with the what rate that is. I think it's probably 24 degrees, which is what the Meteor is and the Interceptor. It feels quite quick on the steering, quicker than the Meteor did, but I haven't quite got to the bottom of why it does that. But it's certainly not. It's a nice bike to ride it in that regard. It's got fairly basic suspension units on it. It's got no adjustment at the front at all, and the rear has got preload adjustment through this step mechanism, and one is for solo riding, somebody at 90 kilos. I think I'm probably 82, 83, something like that. And 6 is for 2 up with fully laden, and anything in between. But you haven't got. But I didn't certainly find any issues with the bike in terms of its handling, because it's not a bike that you're naturally inclined to ride hard, and it's not designed for that. So whilst I upgraded my Interceptor, I wouldn't feel any urge to upgrade the suspension on this unless somebody wanted to do it aesthetically. In terms of height, probably not the best angle to look at it on a ramp in terms of get height, but it's 805 millimeters, which in old language, if you buy your trousers in inches, it's probably best to think about them in terms of inches. It's 31.6 in terms of height, and the Meteor is quite a bit shorter. It's an inch and a half shorter. That 765 or 30.1. I think the Interceptor is 790, 31.1, something like that, but I may be mistaken, and I've put different suspension on it now, so the ride height has changed as I've done that. In terms of weight of the bike, this is slightly heavier than the Meteor. The Meteor is 191, which in old money is 420 pounds, but this one is 195, so it's 429 pounds in terms of weight. And can you feel the £9? Not really. It's not a light bike for its CC, but it's certainly significantly lighter than the £469 of the Interceptor, if weight of the bike is something that's important to you. In terms of brakes, it's got this looks like a very old bike, but I mean, it's got modern technology on it. It hasn't got fancy stuff like traction control, but if you need traction control for 20 brake horsepower, well, I don't know what to say really. Possibly not. It has got ABS, as I say, you can see, and it's linked. So if you do get in a panic, both the front and the back panic together. That's what that wire is there. That's linking that ABS. It's got 270 millimeter rear disc with a single piston, and at the front it's got it's a 300 millimeter disc with a twin piston. Personally, I didn't notice it on the Meteor, but I didn't think it had much feel at the front. So, but that might just be because the pads are bedding in or whatever. And it was certainly nothing alarming, but just a comment that I felt needed to be made because I did notice it. So finish. One of the things I do like about these little bikes is I do think they are aesthetically, they're nice to look at. And I'll touch a bit more on that with styling. And the paint's quite good. It's not perfect. You can spot the odd little flaw in it, and the sort of welding on the seams. I'm not sure if you're going to capture that with that light or not. You can see it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. It's actually genuinely got some chrome on it. Old-fashioned things like this thing is actually metal. A lot of bikes aren't nowadays. And that's a sticker on there, by the way. It's not painted. Don't know if you can hear the edge on it. It's got the aluminium casings on there. That chain is fairly basic, so that will be reflecting the salt. I've seen a few articles actually on people or on the forums comments, people saying, well, the finish isn't very good and it corrodes very badly. What I would say is, yeah, I think you've got to keep your eye on it, but salt destroys anything. And it's not the only bike that I've got that you need to, or that I've been around, that you need to keep your eye on. What I actually did, I've just been on holiday, and just before I went away, I stuck a couple of, just show you there, a couple of screws through nuts, and in a tiny little bit of warm water, and I just sprinkled some salt on it. And when I came back from holiday, this is what they look like. So you can see that's a little self-tapping screw, and that is literally 2 weeks. That one was stainless, and you can see where I've had some copper grease on there, and that did actually help protect it. But I guess the reason why I'm showing you that is to make the point that it doesn't matter what bike you are, they won't like salt. So washing it off with clear water, clear cold water at the end of your ride is going to definitely help, and you will need to coat and protect the bike to keep it anything like as attractive as they are new. So people sort of have been questioning, well, will it all be covered under warranty? I doubt it. The warranty is 3 years, which is attractive to some potential buyers of the bike, but if you read the handbook, there's quite a few exclusions, including about who does the servicing and various other things, which legally there might be some arguments about that, but I suspect you probably get involved in an argument you could do without. And if you want the warranty, I think the most simple way is get it serviced every 3,000 miles, and they'll cover you for most of the big things in life, which is really what a warranty is about. It's a £4,439 bike, and I think it's a lot of bike for the money. The gearbox is a 5-speed gearbox. It's really a 4-speed with an overdrive. The difference between the Meteor and the Classic is whether you want a heel and toe lock. This is a bit more substantial than the gear change mechanism on the Meteor, which is, I'm going to say the wrong words now, which look like pressed steel as opposed to this chrome solid lever. But whether you actually like the change or not, that's I quite liked the change on the Meteor. Very easy. In terms of how the gearbox felt when I'm running it in, very smooth. Occasionally paused between, so I had to have 2 goes at it between second and third. Just had to sort of I'll give it a little bit more revs, sometimes a little less revs, just to click it in. But I may have, it's running in, and 2, I might have been trying to be a bit too gentle with it, respecting that I'm running this in for the dealer. But I'll touch later when we do the conclusion as to what gear change I liked and what riding position I liked. But again, they're all about personal choices. In terms of the styling, it's clearly inspired by, it's a retrospective bike, or retro as we call them, inspired by the 1950s G2 bike, and they did actually build a Bullet in 2008, 2009. They made a 350 and a 500 version. And actually the 350 was very similar power to this, actually, with carbs but without the constraint of the emissions control. This particular bike is called Chrome Red, and I think it's an attractive bike. There are two other versions, and obviously you need to speak to the dealer if you're interested in one of them, and they'll go through the various options with you. This is the top of the range one, and it's 44, as I touched on earlier, 4439. I think bikes like this, in terms of style, you get the emotional reaction. You do so immediately take a step back in time to that sort of 50s feel. But it has got, it's a modern bike. It's in terms of how it's built. We touched on the pistons earlier. It's got ABS. It's got a USB port in there somewhere, and it's got an LED on the front. But it's all done quite stylishly in a way that makes you believe that you're riding a bike from a different period. But whether you like this style or the Meteor is about personal preference, and we're lucky enough to have the choice. So, what was it like to ride? Well, I did about 130 miles on the bike. I liked it a few more, but circumstances got in the way, and I rode it along A roads. I went down to Windsor, via Henley and various other places. Just a nice country bimble, really, which I think is what the bike's really good at, and is to be enjoyed at. Is those sort of roads. This is not a bike that I particularly want to do any long journeys on in terms of motorway or dual carriageways. The bike will actually do. When it's running, this one's not running, but just over 70. It says 75 on the clock when I was running with a Meteor. And it's, what would I use it for? Well, you've got three options with a bike like this. Is it a Sunday morning potter? Well, definitely, you can do all of that, and it's very nice to do it. Nice and comfortable, very leisurely. Could you commute on it? Yes, I think you could, as long as you weren't going too far, and it wasn't too much sort of high-speed carriageway or motorway. Could you tour on it? Well, I'm a great believer you can tour on anything. I personally wouldn't want to tour on a bike of 20 brake horsepower, but people do, and they have great fun doing so. So I'd be the last to criticise them if people chose to do that. But I think it is a lovely bike to go from sort of cafe to cafe. It's not a cafe racer. You won't be doing any racing, but it is a bike just to pot along, take the countryside in, and then pause and catch up with friends and enjoy your riding out. It was very, very comfortable. I did actually suffer from aches and pains on it, and I was going to say, well, I'm not sure about the riding position, but sadly I've managed to catch COVID. So the reason why I was having aches and pains when I rode it was probably because of that rather than because of the riding position. But I would suggest that anybody who actually is thinking of either this or the Meteor, try both. See what the riding position are. The riding position of the Meteor is lower, and that might suit people. And I personally found the gear change mechanism really nice and relaxing. What I liked about the Meteor in terms of its riding position was it was a bike that when I got on it, it told me this is going to be fun, but let's not be trying to go anywhere in a rush, because instinctively it sort of gives you that feeling from its riding position. While this is a more standard upright sit up and beg sort of bike, so I would get it confused with my Interceptor if I tried to ride it, and then probably be slightly disappointed that it didn't go very well compared to my 865 Interceptor. So that's probably unfair. But I think aesthetically, I mean, these are all personal choices, I actually prefer the look of the Classic. I think it really captures that 50s spirit, and I love the chrome on it and the compartmentalisation here and how it looks. So aesthetically, this is a winner for me, but riding wise, I prefer the Meteor. But what preference you have is all about trying them. We're lucky, aren't we? We've got two choices of very similar bikes. They're same engines, same brakes, broadly the same chassis, although this is 5mm longer. Not that 5mm make much difference, so it's not exactly the same, but it is virtually the same in terms of its dimensions and characteristics. So I enjoyed the bike. I think if you can live with a bike that realistically does 55 to 65, I'm not a great believer that riding anything flat out all the time is a great way forward. It will do more, but as I say, I think if you're comfortable with something like that, I think this would be a nice choice. They're fantastic value for money, and I think it's a great little bike. So I hope whatever choice you make that you enjoy it. I also hope that you've enjoyed this video and you found it useful. And if you did, perhaps you'd be kind enough to press like or maybe even subscribe to the channel. But regardless of any of that, and whether you choose to or not, what I do hope that you do is that you ride safe and stay well.